Good morning and Assalamualaikum everyone. Thank you so much, Tricia, for a very good introduction and setting the scene for this the presentation today, and as well as the chairman for introducing us. The members for this study is myself, Mr. Kusari Matno, and Amy Farha. Mr. Kusari Matno is a former associate professor from the Faculty of Economics and Management UPM, and he was also research fellow at the Institute of Kajian Dasar Pertanian dan Makanan. Amy Farha alias is a research officer at this institute. All right. Okay, the line of discussion, as usual, we will provide you the so-called background, objectives, methodology, findings, and of course the roadmap. This is a very challenging task, because I heard this morning that the government are into a big estate project, which will be implemented by some corporation as well as agencies. So that's a new development. Right. Tricia has provided the background, and our earlier book, written by my good friends, Professor Bustano, and of course, Dr. John Tze Tzin, together with myself, we have evaluated the performance of Bernas as a state trading enterprise in food security objective. Of course, as mentioned by Tricia, there are lots of unintended consequences which explain for the slow growth of the industry, and as well as the continuous farmers in the poverty category. There is a P40. According to MOA, 90% of them are in the P40 category, not mentioning other unintended consequences such as there is no value-added development, no SME, and so on, right? So based on this study, I think me and Dr. Tay, we have come up with some recommendation, right? So we have categorized, there were a number of recommendations that we provided, but we have categorized the major ones, and these are in terms of market regulation, market deregulation, and on the national stockpile, and of course national rice stockpile now is under Bernas. And then we will provide some suggestion as to how to manage this stockpile in the future. Collective action among the farmers, and the establishment of a new board, which we call it National Rice Board, which we propose as National Rice Board. And then we come up with our own roadmap. So I'm very happy that all of you are here. I can see that some of you are from Paddy and rice industry, some from outsiders, and some of my friends. Thank you very much. You are here to help us to improve the effectiveness and of course the smoothness of this transformation, for the paddy and rice industry. Right. The objective is this. Number one, we want to introduce a new kind of payments to farmers to replace with the current setup. And these are output-based payment based on output produced, and direct compensation payments to farmers. And also one payment, we call it area-based decoupled payment. I'm sure Laurence are familiar with this because EU or European unions are practicing it, Korea, Mexico, and so on. The impact on revenue and yield to farmers, and to derive some what we call local rice. If we deregulate the market, what would be the prices to consumers, to producers, to retailers, to wholesalers, and importers, right? Then we can see whether it is good or in what respect it impacted the various stakeholders in the industry. And of course, to look at some of the institutional proposals, which include stockpile management, collective action, and the new National Rice Board, and to describe a bit on the policy roadmap. Methodological wise, we have adopted two approaches here. One is what we call analytical computation. Is a kind of a very static analysis to get some averages, the prices, the probable markup, and the cost of production, the cost of handling, cost of marketing, and see their margin, and see whether they can survive under the so-called new deregulated market. And we have adopted also system dynamics model. System dynamic model is about an application, a computer application that can simulate various policy design on a system. That system comprises a number of elements that interact with each other, what we call structural element, and how it affects the behavior, and the overall performance of the industry. So we can see the behavior over time and in some cases over spaces. So we have developed three sub-modules or three sub-models, and they are paddy production sector to see the impact of these payments on their revenue, meaning we have to look at the revenue, the yield, the production cost, the production quantity, input cost, as well as non-labor cost. So we need to develop that model, that dynamic model. Dynamic means here changes over time, yeah, taking into account the behavioral or the interaction between the elements in the subsystem. Price transmission process is looking at the transmission of a price, import price, the moment we open it up, and how it is kind of transferred at the various level of the supply chain, and how much each participant will get or will get the prices for their produce, right? And on stockpile management, right? So we have a model, sub-model for stockpile management, right? So two methods there. So these are summaries of our findings. All right. Look carefully. So what we are proposing actually is to move away from the current structure, not towards a totally liberated market or liberalized market, or yeah, a liberalized market, but we want to have kind of a stages transformation. So the current setup, guys, current setup is the farmers getting 1.2K guaranteed minimum price, output subsidy 360 ringgit per ton, input subsidy about 2.5K, yeah, the yellow one here, right? So their net farm revenue is 4.1K. Take note that this is for one season. One season is 6 months. So you can imagine how much they get per month per hectare. It's about 500 to 600. So depending on the hectareage as well as their yield, that will determine the revenue. But all in all, based on our studies, they are getting a poor return. But that does not include their off-farm. The sad part is we don't have data on their off-farm income. So we have informed IPB to carry out a study is how much is their enterprises beyond farm. So we know really what is their net return, but never mind. So the yellow columns are the subsidies given to the farmers, except that for GMP, these are the supported price. So you can minus the market price by looking at the border price, the difference are the subsidies from the government. So we want to transform that gradually by eliminating input subsidy, this one. So instead of giving out subsidies, if NAFAS is here, they are distributing all sorts of subsidies from capo to labor wages, yeah, or cost for some activities, fertilizer, pesticide, weedicide, growth enhancer, and all sorts of subsidies. It has diversified after the crisis in 2008. So, and NAFAS is in charge of the distribution, and because of the various subsidies and centralized distribution, it can be costly in terms of transaction costs, and not mentioning the rent-seeking behavior over time, which is quite a norm in this field. Right, so we want to transform that into output-based payment where we do without subsidies, but they are paid on output. So meaning we pay them input subsidy, right here, total here, all right? And together with GMP, you multiply that by their say yield. So based on MAFI, the average yield is 3.73 for the whole nation. So these are the total net revenue. So this is an output-based payment depending on the yield as well as the hectareage. So basically, the only advantage is this one, this area, this white area. So there'll be no cost to the government in a messy distribution of fertilizer. You know very well. Let me quote you a national audit report on the delay in subsidy distribution. The delays are between 22 days to 222 days. So imagine the cost to the system and the cost to farmers and the impact on yield. That's one. And number two, the formula has been, yeah, in 50 years, it's similar to all types of soil. for 50 years. So you can imagine, again, the excessive or the waste there, where fertilizer is not tailored to the soil type and the geological condition of the farm surrounding. So only now I heard they are starting to do the soil survey, right? So there are lots of wastage there, but at least in this system, they are paid based on output. Of course, the economists say that farmers are more responsive to output, which is true compared to input, and hopefully, yeah, they will improve their yield. So that's the advantage of that. But still, we have to pay the subsidy. Then we move on to the next payment, where we give them compensation. It's still a subsidy, except that we do away with input subsidy, right? We give them a GMP and the total value of subsidy. But the amount we calculated is here, about 3,008, about 4K, inclusive of GMP, inclusive of the subsidy value. This is the maximum amount that we can provide to the farmers, right? Of course, the actual amount can be lower than that, depending on the capability, financial capability of the government, and of course their political commitment. I know in some countries in European Union, for example, there was one case in Spain, as well as Greece, they only paid the farmers a direct payment about 60% of the market value. So the value can vary depending on the goal of the government and the capacity. Okay, so we give them compensation, right? A direct payment to them, right? So as you can see, yeah, the net revenue, the calculated net revenue is all the same across the various type, these four various type of payments, right? The next one is, this is a new concept to Malaysia, but it's not new to European Union, not new to, it was introduced way back, if I may recall, I think in 1950s. Let me check on this one. But it was introduced by somebody from US, and it is has been implemented in US, Korea, Mexico, Turkey, European Union. There are so many countries in European Union, right? So area-based decoupled payment basically means amount of payment that is connected to variables that are distorting the market, meaning the production decision, yeah, input subsidy and so on. I mean, totally decoupled from that, but we give them money so that the farmers continue farming. The difference between this and that, area-based decoupled payment is, it is decoupled from production decision, post-production decision. Sometimes they call it post-production decision, and it is conditional. In European Union or in some other countries, it is conditional. Yeah, for example, the farmers practices some ecological, sustainable practices or environmentally farm practices. So the purpose of area-based decoupled payment can be also for sustainability of the farm and environmental objective. I know in China they give the farmers fixed quantum to the farmers every year. So it's very easy. I mean, one of the advantages is you don't have to think of the budget every year. It's a fixed payment to the farmers. So Korea is about the same too. So the why this is the one that we do without with, right? So we just can give them money and let them decide for themselves. In the end, it will get the same amount of revenue. This is just a what we call it a static at point in time calculation. Of course, the number can vary depending on the prices and so on and costs, right? But this is just to give you the conceptual overview. What would happen if we implement this three new payments, right? Okay, right. So basically what we are proposing is a gradual subsidy transformation from the heavily subsidized currently practice towards one, an output-based payment. We test that, and then towards direct compensation, and later area-based decoupled payment or ABDP. All right. So these two, direct compensation and area-based decoupled payment, are similar, except that ABDP is implemented with a purpose. In the Malaysian case, is to make sure the farmers remain in the paddy sector. This is because if you look at the agriculture policy, the government still want to maintain 70%, 70 to 80% of self-sufficiency, and still want the farmers to continue into farming. And the signing of big paddy project with I think about 13 or 23, I'm not really sure, of big companies. That shows that the government still want that self-sufficiency level is maintained. Right. So the three methods of payment yield similar net farm returns. So nothing is lost, right? Because it's about same payment. So assuming that the farmers response to prices the way they did in the past, with this new payment, it will yield similar net farm return, and they are still maintained in the industry. So that is the benefit. In short, similar payment method, similar payment value, but different in impact, right? We saw that different in impact, right? Okay, the impacts are those. By giving them direct payment, no input subsidy, meaning we give the farmers the freedom that they yearn for 50 years to decide what is best, what is the optimal input mix for their farms, right? Because nothing is better than their own rational decision for their own farm, because they know their farms best and they know which input is better, which pesticide in the farm for years, and we have to trust them, to make optimal decision for their farms. And with this kind of rational behavior, or with this kind of market responses, we hope that they are able to increase their yield. Number two, we allow farmers to participate in the market economy, right? Currently, they are not, because beyond farm, we have the millers and burners and wholesalers. These are big joint venture kind of business, and beyond and at the agri input sector, it is centralized by NAFAS and PPK. So they have nowhere to go except to plant paddy. That's why their source income have not expanded over the years. So with this new opportunity, maybe who knows? Yeah, they are responding to the market, and they will be encouraged to participate in market economy, like sell directly, or to plant whatever new paddy, or to diversify their farm and so on, right? Because we give them the freedom. And of course, reduce the burden to the government with regards to administrative as well as bureaucratic hassles. Remember, under the current setup, the government has to take care every single stakeholders, from the farmers to PPK to PPN to millers to wholesalers, even to monitor burners, even to monitor consumers. So that is a big cost to the government to monitor everyone. So at least under this current condition, we let the market helps, or we let the market do these functions, and of course, government have other functions, particularly regulatory, and monitoring the industry. So if we reduce their bureaucratic costs and focus on productive capacity of the industry, from farm to milling to value added and so on. And of course, ABDP, area-based decoupled payment, secures the farmers to maintain in paddy production as envisaged by the government since umpteen years. They want the farmers to remain in the farm for political reason, and of course, and also for food security reason. Facilitate budget planning. This is proven in China. They give a same value to all, fixed amount every year. So you don't need to revise the budget. So which is good. It improves your efficiency. Help improve land registry. We need this, right? Of course, there are downside to ABDP, but based on the literature, the benefits outweigh the cost or the downside of it. And of course, the cadastral system. For once, I think we can get a good data set on this land registration, and we can reach out to poor farmers, right? Bring up them to the front, and we can use later. Once they are used to it, we can begin, or we can institute the sustainable practices by attaching condition to the ABDP. So, guys, these are the probable or possible advantage of area-based decoupled payment or direct payment. Malaysia, this is not new. It has been practiced in the US for a long time. also in EU, and Korea has started in 1992, I think, and China, and also Mexico, as well as Turkey. So we have evidences of experience from other countries. So we can minimize risk by studying them. Right, to look at the price on the deregulated import, we're not saying that do away with burners. Burners can still be there. They are very experienced. They can be one of the importers, but open it up to more importers so that it is competitive. That's all. That's why we are asking. Yeah, so that competitive environment is good to minimize monopolistic tendencies. Right. So monopoly will do monopolistic behavior. I mean, this has been proven in literature. Right. So assuming that this is based on 2010 to 2019 price, average of import price. So exchange rate, and we propose tariff because to increase the price, yeah, and also to give revenue to the government. So with tariff and exchange rate, the cost of rice is this much. Therefore, the minimum offer price to wholesalers is about 2.6K, right? A bit higher than the current one. From wholesalers' viewpoint, how much it will offer to millers depending on their markup, right? Their cost and so on. By the time you reach retailers, it's about 3.3 ringgit per kg. Also, it's quite reasonable. And offer to millers is 2.6. One thing about miller, it has double function. It buys from farmers, right? And it sells to wholesalers, right? Whereas and it mills the rice and sells to wholesalers. They also buy rice sometimes from importers. So depending on their size of capital. Let's look at the impact on producers, right? So in our appendices, we have provided the formula of pricing decision. Not that difficult. It's about their markup and also their other costs and also milling rate. So using this variable, we derive the cost to the price to farmers is about 1.3. It's about 100 ringgit more than the current one. This is based on 410 USD dollar per metric ton. So in this analysis, we are able to derive the price to paddy farmers under an open market where we refer to the border price or import price. But sadly, even though with this liberalization, as Laurence pointed out, Malaysia is not ready. With that kind of price, the net revenue per hectare is about a little bit more than the current one. Current one is about 500 to 600 ringgit, 665. The culprit in this figure is yield and cost. This is what the government, I might be wrong. They're not aware that the revenue is a function of quantity, which means yield, and cost of production. So for the future, this is the equation that we must have in mind: how to improve yield and how to reduce cost, right? So if the parameters as they are, as is, the farmers may not benefit that much. All right. But as I mentioned earlier, when we implement the area-based income payment, farmers have the freedom to respond to market, to decide for themselves. So there are probability that they may improve their yield and they may diversify their income, and they might get better net return. How it affects consumers? We found out that not that much either, right? So under the current situation, this is from HES, Household Expenditure Survey 2016. Basically, for the whole of Malaysia, consumers only spend about 1.1% of their income on rice. It's no big deal, So under the so-called deregulated market, the expenditures will be about increased by about 1 ringgit to consumers. It doesn't affect the rich for sure. It doesn't affect the M20 for sure, or maybe B10 or B20. That's all. But even B40 at large, they spend very little, about 43 or 44 ringgit on rice per month. So it's very, very small. So there is no serious concern to the consumers except for probably the neediest one. So meaning if you want to help, it should be the so-called desperate or very poor consumers. So the impact on domestic prices, revenue to farmers are still lower. Hence, if you want to deregulate it, we still need supports from the government. And as I said earlier, it's simple: improve yield, reduce cost of production. Improve yield, nothing else but R&D and extension, right? So all of you are sure, know about aware of the situation of extension in this country, right? The diploma holders, certificate holders, and they cannot keep up, or in fact, they cannot keep up with the problems faced by the farmers, right? Because of too much chemical, it seems that new diseases crop ups and so on. So they couldn't. Some of this is what we probably heard from the farmers and so on. And of course, reduce cost of production. We never had any agenda to produce locally, despite being very rich in biomass as well as paddy-based residues. There are many. You can turn them into fertilizer and so on. So the prospect is there, the potential is there, but it's not being exploited. Right. Consumers, as I said, it doesn't hurt the consumers that much, as they spend only 1.1% of their expenditure on rice, or about 45 ringgit per month. So supports should be made available to the needy group. I'm not very sure, maybe about B10 or B20, So that has to be researched further. And with the money saving from not monitoring input distribution, import and distribution to NAFAS, to PPK, and to PPN and to PPK, they can save that money and focus on productive capacity building. Right. Stockpile management. The issue here is the public want more. Yeah, they want more quantity, more than just we used the level fixed before, that was 150k. So some people want to increase to 200 because they're worried, right? They're worried it might not be able to satisfy during time of shocks, and some people want to reduce further by 50%. Say, I don't know, no. The people, the parliament wants to increase, right? But we want to do here, what if we inject shocks into the system? What if production reduced by half, import reduced by half? And what if the two occur simultaneously? And what would be the impact on the rice coverage, or the amount of rice available per day or per month to the consumers? Is it enough or not? And what if we increase it to 200k? All right. Or what if we reduce it to 100k? All right. So basically, to simulate the impact of shocks into the stockpile management. Right. So these are the results. Basically, what we found is that we should congratulate Bernard for this. The system recovers within 2-3 months. Yeah. So we have chosen the month of April, May to insert or to inject the shocks. If we want to see when the system recover. So the shocks are here, guys. It's around this month. So we found out that by September, it begins to stabilizes. The system stabilizes, right? So the same thing here. This is S1, S2, S3. S1 is production shock, S2 is import shocks, and put that together. This is total stock. This is how many days stock coverage we can maintain during the shock period. All right, but as you can see, by September, it is normalized. Of course, during the shock period, the number of days that we can support to consumers, to the population, reduces, but with time, it can be rectified, or it can be stabilized, right? So these are the total stock, and these are the stock coverage. All right, so these are the months of shocks, and of course the shock continues, but since after month 9, it stabilizes. So the system recovers between 2 to 3 months. Stock coverage could last 27 to 40 days. Well, that's not bad, right? And then whether you want to increase or reduce, the question is about the trade-off. how much is the country willing to pay more if the stockpile is increased more than 150K. From what I heard, it's quite expensive to maintain stock. So the decision depend on the government ability or financial ability to pay for the stock. All right. So, all right. So, the next proposal is collective action, and the government has done it. Group farming, I remember this, 1980, but so sadly there is no report, there is no evaluation. There are a few for group farming in Kedah, we saw it, you know, and of course Paddy semi estate, and of course Paddy estate and EPP. All right. And some study shows that the cost is a lot, particularly in terms of irrigation investment and so on. And in fact, some researcher was saying that even at the tertiary level, you know, it is subsidized. By right, in some countries, FAO has stated it, to increase efficiency, you must not subsidize tertiary level, because we want the farmers to improve it themselves. They are the user, so that they can achieve efficiency. So as for APPs and so on, the amount invested is quite high compared to the achievement in yield and income. And the achievement mainly in MADA area and maybe in IADP in Penang. And then we propose, we propose that the best institutional arrangement for farm is cooperatives. It can be a PPK, but probably PPK is very much politically oriented. But they can be a model as well. But as long as they are independent, they are run by farmers for farmers, and we are proposing a new genre cooperative where it involves forward integration, that farmers involved in value-added activities, and if possible, agribusiness too. That means they also involve in fertilizer distribution in a small way, or maybe they do their own, organic fertilizers and so on. In order to facilitate this, we need small mills. I've said it many times. We need small mills. We don't need big mills. And I have informed many times to policy makers that when I was young in the 70s, 80s, we have more than 1,000 small mills, and 70%, 60 to 70% are cooperative mills. So it was a very good model then. But the moment the RPN was set up, that model or that cooperative mills have to be shut down. And now the concentration of mills are very high, because there are in one area they only have choices at least one or two mills only. So it is not competitive, right? Rice board. I think we propose a national rice board to do this following function. Of course, developmental, planning, regulating, and M&E, monitoring, evaluation. And we propose that the board take a system approach, meaning to look the industry in a holistic perspective, from the input to behavior to supply chain, yeah, to competition, to the impact of international variability. I know it's difficult, but it has to be done. Otherwise, you may not be able to monitor or to ensure that the industry is can be resilient and sustainable in the future. Right. So we have listed the various functions of National Rice Board. This has implication to IPB. They have to monitor demand, supply, price. They need a big data to develop early warning system, databases. Yeah, they have to work with MyCC with regards to monitoring the once the market is deregulated. We need a strong support from MyCC to monitor malpractices or merger and acquisition, right? Digitalization is a must these days to help the supply chain, the continuous M&E. Farm management, please bring back farm management. That's the only way we can monitor the performance of the farmers by areas, by region, and also for input as input for policy monitoring. A truly farm management record. It has its own principles and so on. Economic welfare of the farmers. We need to study also to make sure that the welfare in terms of health, in terms of their family, in terms of their, societal environment and so on. Cooperatives, group farming or whatever, and to help with them to be involved in value added through small mills, small machine for small farms, and other instruments. Yeah, and this requires extension, advisory services, and to monitor stock file performance. Right. Okay. So there are questions about what happens to Berna's other Berna's social function. We think that it's not a serious issue because the buyer of last resort functions, once you open up the market forces may do the clearing functions, because market has its own way of channeling, channeling a low quality rice either for feedstock or sell at low price and so on. They know how to handle that. For the Putra mills, I think it should be handled by MITI under the SMI Development Corporation. Local input development is imminent to reduce production costs. And based on literature, I think this is done in Taiwan, I think, Korea as well. ABDP need to be supported too. Yeah. For example, with tariff or maybe some assistance, because paddy is highly vulnerable to calamities, natural calamities. So we need crop insurance and credit facilities. There you are. This is our roadmap. This is our philosophy. Growth, we need the growth, sectoral expansion, advancement to produce high quality and so on, healthy, affordable, diversified rice-based products. That's new word here. The new word here is rice-based product. As I mentioned earlier, Malaysia only have rice and bihun, right? Compared to Japan, compared to Korea, they have enriched the farmers by rice-based product. For example, wine, health product, baby products, or construction material. I think in my earlier presentation with John, I have listed the number of products that can be produced based on paddy and rice, right? When we develop rice-based product, this will increase the value of primary product that is paddy. Because we don't have any rice-based product, that's why paddy has remained the same over the years. All right, equitability, yeah, which is very obvious. The farmers are poor. We are not saying that the millers should not have profit, but we want the farmers also to enjoy or to have the share of cake so that they can be sustainable. Otherwise, the government has to pump more money, and yet the productivity have not improved. Of course, eco-friendly paddy is important for the future. So we are saying that the current situation is virtuous circle of slow growth. Yeah, so we want to change that towards a virtuous circle where higher productivity, higher productivity, higher income, and that leads to better input use, and therefore their situation will improve. All right, the goals of roadmap is to empower farmers with entrepreneurship, to nurture SME, to create fair, healthy competition and equal market opportunities at all market level. The word here is market opportunities at all levels, including the farmers, and to adopt environmentally farm practices, precision farming, and there are technology here, and low water footprint paddy production, and of course circular economy application, meaning to channel those paddy-based products to various output. Yeah, all right. This is what I'm sorry. I'm not like the young generation to have a fancy diagram. This is a simple diagram. So we are here, right? We are here. The current structure: input is subsidized, output is subsidized. The GMP, not mentioning licensing, regulation, and so on. We have price ceiling to consumers. We have monopoly. So we can see totally a protected regime for the industry, both paddy, primary, as well as rice, right? So we want to move towards a deregulated market. All right, we're not envisioning a totally liberalized, because with ABDP, without area-based payment, all right, or compensation payment together with ABDP, the government has to be in. Except that we give lots of freedom to farmers to decide for themselves, to participate in market economy, all right, and to help them with collective action, small mills, small gadgets, and so on, digitalization, right, cooperative, SME development. Hopefully they will improve, and rice-based industry will develop, and that makes the industry much more dynamic. So this is a gradual transformation. we visualize a gradual transformation. It has to be done in our report. We say that we need to do it gradually. It has to be done on experimental basis. Maybe we can adopt one area on pilot basis. We can try this effort-based payment, later compensation payment. I missed ABDP here, and later ABDP. This is supported with collective action and national rice stockpile. Oh, sorry, it should be a national rice board here. Sorry about that. And then this is crucial. This is where the government comes in. It has to be institutional support, extension, digitalization, input sector development, small mills and small machine for small farmers, new gen co-ops, and SME development. With that, I end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Fatimah, for a very comprehensive and detailed presentation. I think there's many important aspects that we need to get into in the discussion, ranging from how we transition the subsidies to how we prepare for the deregulated imports, and then what is the new institutional structure around it. I think, as I was going through the report, I reflect that I think sometimes it's difficult, like words like liberalization or deregulation can sometimes be an oversimplification, I think, and that really we're talking about what is the market structure we want to deliver the social and economic goals for the industry and for the society at large. And I think we approach the discussion with that frame of mind, and it's I think it's very helpful because there are lots of different trade-offs that we're trying to balance here, and I think you've accurately in the report highlighted what those choices are and the different things we need to balance as we move forward with this hypothetical roadmap. Of course, we hope the government will adopt these considerations, but of course, it's a proposal at this stage. So I'm very pleased now to move to our panel discussion. So I'll invite our two panelists to switch on their videos and join us. I'm very pleased to introduce YB Sim Tze Tzin, who is the MP for Bayan Baru. And as I think, as we mentioned earlier, in the previous administration, he served as the Deputy Minister of Agriculture and Agro-based Industries. So he's very well placed to reflect on the previous government's sort of direction on this issue. He served previously as the Member of Parliament for Bayan, he has served as the MP for Bayan Baru since May 2013. And he also served as the member of the Penang State Legislative Assembly for Pentai Jejarak from March 2008 to May 2013. He's a member and a strategy director of the People's Justice Party, PKR. Along YB, I'm very pleased to also introduce Dr. Tae Yong Sheng, who has also already been mentioned by Prof. Fatimah, and who collaborated with Prof. Fatimah on the previous report. Dr. Tae is a development agribusiness specialist and very experienced in business and policy design and evaluation. He is currently a senior researcher at the Institute of Tropical Agriculture and Food Security at Universiti Putra, Malaysia. He is also an associate research fellow at the Institute of Strategic and International Studies, Malaysia. Beyond academia, he is an independent director of Simple Farm Groups, and he has consulted for private firms, public agencies, international bodies, including the World Bank and the Food and Agricultural Organization of the UN, and certification entities. His key areas of expertise include agri-food value chain integration and development, infusing innovative institutions, policies, and strategies, food security, and sustainable development. He studied his PhD in agricultural business and extension through the Adelaide Scholarship from the University of Adelaide. He also earned a certificate in business valuation from the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants. So I think you'll agree we've got two very well-placed commentators to respond to the proposals that Prof. Fatimah has presented. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite both of our panelists to just respond with some initial comments to what Prof. Fatimah has presented from their different perspectives. And then we'll move to a Q&A session until 12 o'clock. So we've got just over an hour for that. So if you do have any questions, please do share them in the Q&A box. And I'll try to cover as many as I can. But if there are any excess, then we agreed before the session with Prof. Fatimah that we would print off or save any of the excess questions that we weren't able to get to, and we'll provide an answer on our Facebook page. So please do share your questions, and I'll try to get to as many as I can. So I'm going to start by first inviting YB Sin to share his perspective on what Prof. Fatimah has presented, and from also his perspective from being within the Pakistan government at the time when there was a sort of a real effort to try to address these structural challenges in the rice paddy industry. Over to you, YB.
Thank you, Laurence. Good morning, Tricia. Good morning, Professor Fatimah. Good morning, Dr. Tay, and Iskandar as well, and also the audience. I'm very happy to be here today, and I see many participants are from my former ministry, my colleagues in MAFI. I want to say thank you for tuning in. And I would like to say that MAFI and the Ministry of Agriculture has done a tremendous good job in providing services to the farmers, and they have been my colleagues in MAFI. They are very committed. I've seen over 22 months that they are committed. They have a lot of passion and also a lot of hard work in helping the farmers. However, we also know that there's structural problems that's happening, which Professor Fatimah has pointed out. This is where I think we need to take a look at it. Before I go into the comments, I also want to share my experience in the Ministry of Agriculture. I started the manifesto of Pakatan Harapan to introduce competition and liberalizations in paddy sector, especially Bernas, demonopolization of Bernas was actually, I was one of the participants in drafting the manifesto. So I know very well that we need a certain reform in the rice sector. So when we go into Ministry of Agriculture, then we started to understand, actually there's a lot, it is a huge sector which everyone has an interest, and also we call it industry complex. And then as a minister, we also have to take care of the 260,000 farmers, hundreds of PPKs, and then a lot of vested interests, the provider, the service provider, the NAFAs, and a lot of distributions, supply chain, etc. So when we first day after we get in, there are a lot of lobbies, a lot of people who see us, they persuade us, different ideas, and eventually what they want is more government subsidies. That's all. Okay, because to them that's the easiest way out. For government, the government's mentality also is about control. How do we control? How do we don't rock the boat? Because there's hundreds of thousands of farmers, and most importantly, 32 million rice consumer, the entire Malaysia, 32 million. So as a government, naturally, you will become very conservative and you are afraid to rock the boat. That's why reform cannot happen. And we also know that if reform doesn't happen, then the rice sectors and the paddy sectors will forever be the same. And there's no competition, there's no dynamism, and eventually the farmers will continue to be poor. To give you a perspective, the farmers is only earning 535 ringgit per month on average. Okay, some make more, maybe 800, 1,000, but the lowest is 500. So the farmers are condemned to be eternal perpetual poverty. Yeah. So to us, to me, we cannot continue to let the status quo is not an option. We need to reform. So how do we reform? We also know that it's a complex supply chain. 32 million Malaysians depend on it. So we cannot also introduce drastic changes. We cannot be too hasty, as it has to be a very proper procedure. So that's why I'm very happy to see Professor's roadmap. Yeah? This is a good roadmap. And the biggest game changer, I think, from reading the report is the direct payment to farmers. To give you a perspective, every year, Malaysia subsidized farmers total subsidy for farmers is 1.5 billion ringgit. 1.5 billion ringgit. And then all agencies giving to IPB, give to MARDI, MADA, GADA, IDA. IDA is Integrated Agricultural Development Area, which is mostly paddy, and given to LPP, Lembaga Pertubuhan Ladang, giving to NAFAS, giving to all grants, giving to PPK, and etc. It amounts to another maybe 500 million. So total subsidies for farmers is about 2 billion a year. And then there's also another 1 billion of development grants, development projects, creating drains, pengairan, which is a drainage and irrigation system for the paddy, building various kind of infrastructure for paddy, and especially in the IDA area, in MADA, or Integrated Agricultural Development Area. So that amounts to another billion. So total is about 2.5 to 3 billion a year for paddy sector. To me, it is not sustainable. If we give 3 billion, 2.5 billion to 3 billion a year to paddy sector, and still farmers are so poor, that means something is wrong. So to me, I think a game changer like this roadmap is important, giving the subsidy money directly to farmers. I agree with Professor Fatimah. Farmers are smart. They know how to do they know how to work on their farm. They know what is best for their farm. The issue now is that the government doesn't trust I would say the government has this mentality of, let me control you. I need you. I know best. The farmers, you don't know, we know best. So we decide which kind of fertilizer, and the fertilizer is one size fits all from Perlis to Sabah and Sarawak, all the same. And then the kind of what do you call centralized control, machinery, regulations, etc. All are controlled by government. So that doesn't work anymore in this time and age. So we need to do is to reform that. Direct subsidy is the best. And then we also need to encourage various stakeholders such as NAFAS. I would say that NAFAS and PPK, they will be in the system. A lot of NAFAS, they are afraid of reform. PPK is afraid of reform because they are afraid that other people will take over their role and their contract, which is wrong. NAFAS, PPK, they are farmers. They know they will be there together with the farmers. It's just that when we instill certain competition, they will become a real service provider to the farmers. No longer they no longer just need to deal with the government. Right now, NAFAS just has to deal with one client, one customer, that is the government. Okay, so their service to the farmers will be less than satisfactory. But if the farmers is the real customer which pays NAFAS and PPK, then the table is turned, and the service provider like NAFAS and all this will be very customer friendly. They will serve the farmers better. They'll be very competitive. So that's why I say the game changer is direct transfer of payment to subsidies to farmers. During our time, I introduced and we push for e-wallet subsidy, direct subsidy through e-wallets to all farmers. I'm not too sure whether it is still going on, but I have not heard anything announcement in the parliament after that. Besides from this game changer and all these roadmaps, I also want to put in my perspective that the price control of the rice, 2 ringgit 60 cents per kg, is too long overdue. It has been 14 years since 2007, 2008. The price control of 2 ringgit 60 cents. If the kind of as we know that inflations, various price and etc. has gone up. So because of the price control, the farmers actually didn't get any they don't get incentive. They don't feel that they need to, it is a much control. There's no money to be made in rice sector. So ultimately, there's no incentive for them to work hard to increase yield because the price is too low. We always have to remind people, especially the rakyat out there, the 32 million population, no farmers, no rice. Okay, no farmer, no food. So if the farmers cannot make money, they will retire. Old farmers retire. Young farmers will not come into the sector. Then ultimately, the sector will be lost, and we will be forced to import more, which is a lose situation for everyone. So when Professor Fatimah pointed out that it's only 44 ringgit per household per month is spent on buying rice, it doesn't, if we increase 1 or 2 ringgit, or maybe 1 or 2, 10 cents, 20 cents per kg, it doesn't make a huge difference, but it will make a huge difference to the paddy sector, rice sector, where more farmers will benefit, and they will use that money to buy new maybe machine, introduce automation, attract young people to get involved in paddy sector because there's more money to be made. That will actually make the whole sector more vibrant. And finally, I want to, I think government must change the mindset. The government is too protectionist. Everyone wants to protect, and they always feel that they know better. But that kind of protectionist attitude is over. And the problem with government, it has grown too big, too many agencies controlling paddy sector, from IPB, from MADI, IPB to MADI, to MADA, to CADA, to 12 AIDA, and then there's also LPP, there's also NAFAS, there's also PPN, and eventually hundreds and hundreds of PPK, and also Department of Agriculture. All have a stake in this paddy sector. It is too crowded and too big, and and sometimes communication breakdown. One side doesn't know the other sides. So ultimately, farmers don't know where to go. So maybe Professor Fatimah's ideas of having a rice board, a paddy board, it is a good one to have everyone talk to each other. And also another thing is to have a very more authoritative to set the directions and policies for reform. It has to be a reform-minded sector. It cannot be getting everyone together in the rice board and eventually status quo. If we don't have a reform agenda, this rice sector will not grow. And I think the colleagues in what we call MAFI, the problem now is that there has to be a roadmap, and there has to be a buy-in from stakeholders. Now there seems to be lack of directions and lack of political will, and this is a very political sector because that involves 300,000 paddy farmers, heavily subsidized, and agriculture is a very political across the world. We are not alone. In Europe, in the US, you can see that government, Donald Trump is so scared of the farmers. He used all kinds of tactics to protect their farmers. So we can say that actually in any country, agriculture is political. So we need the buy-in from farmers. We need the buy-in from PPK, NAFAS, all the government servants, policy thinkers, for a roadmap to reform, or else it's not going to happen. It's not going to be successful. So with that, I think hopefully we can build a coalition of farmers, PPK, government, and everyone for reform. That is very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, YB. I think your framing of just putting it very starkly, which is that the status quo is not an option. So the question is, how do we move forward from here? And as you said, what we need is just a plan around tackling these structural challenges. And highlighted, I think something that I want to cycle back to, which is like, what are the political barriers? So, what do the farmers really want, and how are their views and their will being manifest currently, and what do consumers want, and where do we need some better education maybe in the longer term about what consumers should expect from their own domestic rice industry. So thank you very much for that. So next I would like to turn to Dr. Tze, who I know is very expert in these topics as well, to provide his reflections on Prof. Fatimah's presentation and the issues that we're discussing today. Over to you, Dr. Tze.
Thank you, Laurence, and thank you, Ideas, for having me. Before I begin, I would like to structure my observations on 3 parts. So first, I would like to supplement and even complement what Tricia, even YB, as well as the Prof. Fatimah have mentioned earlier, including some of the notes that you mentioned, Laurence. And secondly, I will focus on what Prof. Fatimah has proposed, and also what she has not proposed. So that will lead me to the final notes on what are the future areas, as well as some of the considerations that we have to be very careful of. So at the outset, I would like to begin by saying that the paddy and rice industry of Malaysia actually owes 2 huge obligations. So one is about food security, but too often people forget to look at and the role of agricultural transformation. In that itself, since you guys talk about farmer well-being as well as the value chain, so certainly we need a very close look at value chain transformation. And I certainly believe that this is the key critical area that is practically missing in Malaysia at this current stage. So if I could introduce you to the concept of agricultural transformation generally, it has 4 stages of transformation. First, there is to get the agriculture going. That means that you get farmers to participate in agriculture and produce to fulfill your national food security needs. And second stage, it is about creating surplus so that you can begin to channel some of your excess stocks for value-adding exercises. And the third phase is about integrating the agriculture contribution to the macroeconomy. And finally, it is about industrialization so that you have this kind of industrial symbiosis within the country itself. And I refer to this International Institute for Sustainable Development's report. So there is one very interesting report on agricultural transformation in Africa and Asia. And they map out the transformation phase according to the timeline beginning from 1970. What is rather interesting is that they know that Malaysia, as a country which has this huge contribution to the macroeconomy. So what that means is that Malaysia back then was already in the integration stage, which is the number 3 phase, and which means that the country was doing very well in linking the agriculture access to the industry. But don't be mistaken by the kind of observation, because the details are the devils. And this is about education bias as well. If you break it down, you'll begin to notice that you have a huge divide in terms of progress between agricultural sectors. So I think Professor Fletcher of this guy came from America, and he spent a lot of time observing what happened in the rice industry in comparison to palm oil. So what he noticed was that the policy observer always subscribe purely to the national security interest rather than looking at that from a relative term, because we always have to meet the both objectives of safeguarding the national food security as well as the agricultural transformation. By the time you begin to look at their role in relative terms, so it is no longer an either-or policy option. So when you are fulfilling your food security need, you at the same time also like to have the sector transform to a better stage. So with that backdrop, when we look at the paddy and rice industry in the previous report, what we noticed was that the main game changer who can drive the transformation, you can never leave out Bernas. It has a huge role in this industry, and because the manifesto mentioned about liberalization, but liberalization does not mean that you have to do it away. So Prof. Fatimah clarified earlier that Bernas will continue to play a role as a key importer here, but with more competition, there will be a better thing to do. But we need some historical understanding to why Bernas is in the picture here. And I think this kind of understanding is necessary so that we appreciate why the change has to be coupled with market deregulation in terms of subsidies reform. So one key weakness or limitation of liberalizing the importation market is that you will distort and perhaps leave the vulnerable farmers to more risk, because the hypothesis is that the open market is going to bring down the prices of imported rice, and if our local farmers are not competitive enough and be ready for the international competition, they will lose out, and perhaps you will see more share of imported rice in our local market. So this is the basis why this roadmap is very important, because it tries to address both issues at the same time, and you can't do one away without another. So that is the basis why this roadmap is so meaningful. And at the same time, I think that what it proposes here is that in the midterm, the output-based incentive is actually to incentivize surplus, so that you have more access, you have excess stock for industrialization. So without having that, perhaps it will be status quo. So I think the proposal on the output-based incentive is very relevant, and that will induce on-farm investment. And I think YB put it very strongly that our farmers are actually smart. They know what to do with their money and not what to do with their money. So by the time we introduce the output-based incentive, you will begin to see some structural change in terms of farm size, whether we are talking about expansion or consolidation, those will happen. And the output is that you will see increasing yield over time. And this is the basis to move ourselves from continuing to stuck in the second stage of transformation. And I think that provides a good platform to begin with the transformation. And then Prof. Fatimah follows with the proposal on direct payments. In the West, they call it decoupled payment as well as area-based payment. But then if you refer to the terminologies of WTO, Malaysia is currently in the amber box, which means that Malaysia government has introduced a lot of subsidies as well as incentives that are relevant to the production decisions at the farm level, and that's called amber box. And what Prof. Fatimah proposes about the output-based incentive, it is about shifting Malaysia from the amber box to the next box, which is called blue box, which still has somewhat impact on the production decisions. And finally, the decoupled direct payments intends to shift the country from amber box, blue box, and finally to the green box. And that is to withdraw government role in farm management decisions at all. But at the same time, the green box can be used, like Prof. Fatimah described earlier, to enhance the sustainability objectives in farm management as well. So that's what the roadmap can do to us. And I think that what is equally important is also to think about what is the possible downside here and what are the most uncertain variables that could affect the roadmap in achieving its intended objectives. But there is one thing needs to be noted about direct payments is that the land value will be appreciated, and because it intends to withdraw the intervention on the production decisions, what that means is that you are likely to see very minimal impact on the production, in which the yields might grow very slowly over time. So these are the concerns I think that we have to be aware of of what kind of choices that we are proposing here. So in every choice, you have the good and the bad. But many times we need to know what are the good and bad in order to tell the good is actually not that bad. So it is still a very conscious choice. But rather, I think in moving forward, we have to pay very careful attention to the industrial organization, because presently all the mills are making very little profit, including Bernas ones. So Bernas is presently subsidizing their mills through their profits from the importation. But I don't see this as a big risk or uncompetitiveness, because there is the machine has been running and it has been maintained. So I would rather see this as a preserved competitiveness. When the market is unleashed, they are ready to actually reap the benefits. So through that, we are not suggesting that Bernas will be worse off, but instead we are creating the cake to be bigger and larger so that everyone can have a fair share based on their competitiveness. So with that, I would like to actually encourage our observers as well as policy thinkers to pay slightly more attention to what is the difference in our context when it comes to suggesting incentives as well as interventions. Because market liberalization, especially in terms of importation, it is very, very seductive. So often we refer to what the Philippines as well as Indonesia have done in their country. But what really set us quite differently is the market structure of Malaysian paddy and rice industry. So we have quite a monopolistic competition at the retail level as well as wholesaling level. But then we have oligopolistic market structure in milling as well as to some value-adding segments, including vermicelli manufacturing. But further down, you'll begin to find some monopolistic market structure, especially at the local mill level. Say for some non-graining area, maybe farmers, they can only sell to 1 or 2 millers in the local area. So the market structure matters here because it affects the conduct of those participants, and it also affects their performance. And then the cycle continues to inform, as Prof. Fatimah mentioned, it is a feedback loop, how they actually see the prosperity of this industry and whether there's money to be made or it is too competitive. And if you don't liberalize the prices at the retail level, I strongly believe that we cannot see the things move at the upstream as well. So all this have to be done concurrently, and it is something very daunting since the political economic has to be considered here. And I think YB put it very rightly that you can never ignore the interest as well as the vested interest of stakeholders of this industry. So I will just stop here, and perhaps we can mention about some other inputs later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tze. Yeah, I think some very helpful observations, and definitely the point around understanding the political landscape here in terms of actually navigating the option, the like real options for change is something I want to sort of cycle back to in the Q&A. So we've got a few questions that I want to jump straight into. So I think the best place to start is on clarifying or unpacking a little bit more on the subsidy transition. So I think, as YB said, the kind of big immediate, I think, game changer in the report is the proposed transition of on the subsidy structure to more output-based direct compensation that ultimately decouple payment. So I want to come back to you, Prof. Fatimah, to clarify, to sort of unpack a little bit more on what this would mean for the farmers. And specifically, I want to refer to a question we have here from Francisco Diaz Aguirre. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. So I'll just read the question for you. But he says, "Good morning and thanks for the presentation. It was very clear and helpful. The different models look very interesting." His questions are as follows. Even though you explain the economic output will be the same for farmers in all the models, you do not explain how it will be this impact in the financial point of view. I mean, how it will be the impact in the cash flow for the different cases, and also if it will have any impact in terms of taxes. In the case second part of the question is that in the case that there is a difference in cash flow or financial situation between these models, how do you propose to solve the gap in the cash flow between the old model and the new one at the beginning? So it'd be great, Prof, if you could just respond on those points. And if I can just add in my own little sort of spin to the question as well, which is I think that, you know, we all recognize that the priority here is making sure the transition is smooth and that we don't destroy or have any sort of extreme social disruption, which is obviously very bad for the farmers, but also, as White B and both Dr. John pointed out, it's such a strategic industry. So maybe you could also refer in your answer to any other thinking you have, maybe based on experience in other countries, about how to ensure this subsidy transition can be done smoothly from the financial perspective of the farmers. Over to you, Prof.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Right. As for very smooth political transition, I think YB can provide a better solution, because I think the number one challenge here is about making them buying in with the new structural shift, and number two, making them convinced that there is a need for change after 50 years of protectionist regime. And we all see the impact year after year. I think reports after reports. I confess that I've done, I think 4 studies with the same title, which is on the impact on subsidies on the industry. We researchers, my friends, including Dr. Larry and so on, we have proposed similar lines of restructuring, but I don't know, it doesn't seem to happen. In fact, after 2008, it has gotten stronger. When the average of subsidies were about between $500 million, 500K to 700K, suddenly in 2009 it increased to 1.7, and between 2009 and 2012 the allocation was 2.2 billion YB, and now it is 1.5 billion. So the participant asked the financial implications. We have roughly a ballpark figure with this methods of payment. It will cost the government about 2 billion. The problem is data is not available in terms of who are the farmers, the distribution of yield by areas, you know. So this is an average figure. So gross is about 2.2 billion. We have estimated separately. And the tax, the 20% may give the government about $500,000, you know, depending on the price. So $500,000 is enough to induce better research and so on, to repackage or tighten up cooperative and so on. So as mentioned by YB, Paddy is unique. I remember Fletcher came to see me way back in 90s. Paddy is unique. Unlike oil palm is totally commercial product, but Paddy is unique in the sense that it is a food security item, it's staple food, and that it's highly vulnerable to you know, climate change, and of course the political significance is still there, and it is a majority Malay farmers, so that makes it a highly political crop, right? So as I foresee it, as I envisage it, there can never be a kind of big bang change. You know, there are 2 types of change. One, a big bang change overnight is what even one thing about Vietnam and China, the big bang change when they restructure farm, it was radical, but it was for the better, for the betterment of the farmers. The moment you undo the commune farm, the moment you give the freedom to farmers to decide for their own farms, it you know, it creates or it breeds productivity, creativity, and in China, the government has added up, has complemented with R&D, and you know very well China, you know, in terms of 5G, they are so advanced, and they were able to channel this technology to farmers. And somebody was saying that China was able to uplift close to 300 million of farmers out of poverty between 10 to 15 years, and we only have 1 million. Why we couldn't do that? We only have 1 million, but we couldn't do that despite whatever we have done. So without doubt, we have to learn from China, we have to learn from Korea, we have to learn from Japan. In fact yesterday when I had another webinar, I suggested that we bring those Chinese engineers, Chinese researchers, help us to come up with our very own machines so that we reduce import dependencies, help us to produce local fertilizer so that in the long term we can reduce cost of production. So sorry, the question is, yes, that's what about financial costs, and I think 2.2 billion is not high. Hopefully, of course, total value added is about that much also. I check the statistics about the total value added for the industry is around 2 billion or so, so more or less offset. But hopefully, what we cannot capture, because we don't have the data, Mr. Laurence, because say, for example, we don't have data on how farmers responded to even fertilizer. We thought with the tripling of subsidy of fertilizer that yield will increase, but it didn't. It was 4.5 in mid-2000, and now it has reduced to 3.8 despite 1.5 billion, despite the tripling of our value of subsidies. So subsidies has been proven in many literature. Farmers don't respond to subsidies. And then we don't know how they will respond to prices either, because they have been under this regime for 50 years. And my data shows that the GMP, which was 496 ringgit, I think, was implemented for almost 17 years unchanged. Then only it's increased to 550, 650, 750, and now 2014, 120. We cannot develop the supply function because we don't know how they respond to price. The same thing, consumer, right? So we don't have data because the prices have been fixed 2008. So basically, we cannot establish, you know, in a very strong manner the utility function of consumers with regards to rice price. So it is, as my friend from Vietnam say, your system is worse than a Vietnam system. He said everything is centralized, you know. So they have liberalized and we are still behind. So that's my answer.
Great, thank you very much, Prof. I think, yeah, you highlight that. I think that's what we're trying to achieve with this report, is to try and have that conversation about how we move forward. And I think, as Dr. John was saying, there's going to be downsides and there's going to be risk. And as you said, in some areas, we don't have enough data to be able to capture the scale and magnitude of those risks accurately. So then I think that's why we need to have this kind of consultative, broad engagement to make sure that we're capturing all of those issues. So, so thank you very much. And thank you for the question. So I want to come back to YB now. I want to talk a bit about this, the kind of political will issue that you mentioned in your opening remarks, YB. I just want to read you this comment from Amar Reza Ahmad Rizal, who says, what will the liberalization benefit to both government and farmers if the expenses will be the same? Government loses if its political capital due to diminishing of the input subsidy. The complex structure of land ownership and difficulty to get formal credit facility will disincentivize farmers, to increase their productivity. So unless liberalization is ultimately able to reduce government spending, then that's the only thing that's going to incentivize them to go for it. And if not, we're stuck with the status quo. So I just wanted to to get your response to that comment, and then sort of, if I can sort of add on the end of it, what do you think is the political coalition that needs to be built? I think you mentioned a few of the different interests, and of course we've talked about consumers, we've talked about the farmers, we've talked about the industry, of course, Bernas and the other institutional frameworks. I guess within all of that, is it your sense that there is support for this kind of transition from the farming community themselves? Would the farmers themselves like to see a transition from the kind of current structure of input subsidies towards more forms of direct compensation? So yes, if you could comment, YB, on sort of the politics of all of that and how we build that coalition. And then specifically, if you could share your own perspective on whether the farmers themselves, you think, would support the kind of proposals that are being presented here.
Okay, thank you for this very difficult question. But this is why Paddy is huge and difficult, yeah? So to ask, okay, first of all, whether the farmers support reform or not, I think farmers are suffering you know, with only about 500, 800 per month, they are the lowest P40 and the poorest of the poor. So the option, there's no, I mean, anyone with a heart, the justice, the you know, have and we should reform. I mean, anyone who feels for the farmers will agree that a reform is important, and then the status quo is no longer an option. Second question is whether we should take away the subsidies or no with liberalization. Absolutely no, because this, like what Professor Fatimah has presented, even you take a, you introduce competition and etc., rice and paddy still needs a lot of subsidies and support from the government, because it cannot, and all over the world, including China, India, Thailand or Vietnam, they still get a lot of support from the government in rice and paddy sector, because this is a food security issue. So I believe that we cannot take away, but we, with competition and with not to say liberalization sometimes is a bad word, but I mean, to a lot of people who are afraid of market, they feel that the big corporations come to take over. They are afraid. So what I'm saying is that competition and what they call gradual reform in the rice sector is important, so that the market becomes, you take away wastages, rent seeking, and vested interest. If in agriculture or in any business, there's always a vested interest. Okay, it's always there. So how do you manage stakeholders for them to see the bigger picture? For example, now that's why we want to advise everyone in the rice sector. This sector is failing. Okay, if we don't, as a collectively, the value, the entire value chain doesn't do something, it is going to affect everyone, and everyone is going to be, because market competition from overseas is huge. We are losing our competitiveness. Our rice are not the best anymore. Our, what do you call, the price is, the cost of production is high. There's no value add into the production. The technology is old. So eventually we will lose out, and the whole sector will lose competitiveness. And consumers are increasingly turning to import rice. There are more varieties, such as, you know, people like to eat basmati rice now. People want to eat this Japanica or something. So these are things that's coming in, and if we continue to be the same, then we're going to lose out. Finally, I think we also have to introduce competition not only in the market segment, but it's also government segment. For example, Mardi had absolute right to decide which breed or new variety introduced into the market. Actually, there are a lot of universities such as UPM, UKM, and even Institute Atomic Negara, yeah, they also wants to introduce new variety to the market, but it's controlled by Madi. I think the competition should be introduced at all levels, including the R&D sector, yeah, for example. So Madi should loosen up. They should compete. They should have more breeders compete with each other, including from UPM and UKM, etc. Second is the relaxation of regulations. Do you know that actually transporting of rice from one state to another needs permit? This is actually an era of a communist era, yeah, where government impose these checks. You need to permit to transport from one state to another state, because of they're afraid that the communists can get hold of rice. This is, and also to protect certain what do you call, millers and etc. This is so old. This regulation is so old, and it doesn't make sense anymore. I give you an example. There's a paddy farmers. There's a what do you call, miller wants to sell Sarawak rice. what they call in barrio rice from Sarawak to Peninsula. They couldn't. So they came to see me and I helped them to get the permit to sell in Peninsula. You know what? The rice that they sell now, barrio rice, they can sell for 1 kg, can go up to 100 ringgit per kg now. So immediately, the farmers in Sabah and Sarawak, the farmers there can immediately make money, and they are much well off, and they will put more incentive into better rice, organic, and then different variety. So and actually benefits them. And for Malaysia, West Malaysia, the first time I bought the rice, and then I brought the rice home. My kids, they find this. I have never seen rice in red color, in black color, in chocolate color, and different colors of rice. So they were very amazed and amazed by it. So what I'm saying is that it actually, a lot of regulation, if we take away, it actually benefits everyone. So deregulation, less control, support, empower the farmers rather than control, empower, give them more benefits and control over their own life and their farms. It's important.
Thank you very much, YB. I think Dr. John, you want to add something onto YB's comments?
Yeah. YB has given out things that I wanted to say, but there are something that I would like to compliment here. So I think the main issue is whether farmers will buy in the idea of subsidy reform. So Prof. Fatimah proposes a midterm as well as long-term suggestions here. So I would like to highlight on this output-based incentive, and this is very, very important to farmers because that will encourage them to invest in latest technology and also begin to thinking how to reformulate their plant materials as well as inputs so that they get the highest yield. As Prof. Fatimah pointed out, that is the main condition of their income. So with improved yield, you are going to see farmers earning more than before, and they are better off in that sense. So land expansion, I think that that's going to happen as well. And what's more important is that on aggregate, you begin to have some surplus. And Prof. Fatimah also proposes that farmers should come together and form their own cooperative for collective actions as well as interests. And one of those in particular, it is about off-farm investment. So why is this important? Even if you look at the present market structure in Malaysia, in this paddy and rice industry, this industry gives you a forward linkage which is about 1.5. What that means is that your primary output is going to generate more value to other sectors. If let's say there is 1 billion investment in this area, it's going to bring out a 1.5 billion. So with this kind of multiplier, it is very attractive to do value adding exercises. And furthermore, if you look at the output multiplier, it's presently about 1.2, in which it is expanded by the value added multiplier consisting about 80%. So this again shows that how much value is remains untapped at the current state. So what is really important is that how do you incentivize farmers to improve their yield? And it is not just about improving their livelihood, but also allowing to have this kind of special, what do you call it, flexible specialization in the value chain. So they can begin to allocate their outputs to places depending on the market demand as well as the market prices. Because they will begin to think how to optimize their returns, and not just at the farm level, but in the value chain as well. But for the country, what is rather more important is that your value chain strength is only as strong as your weakness. So if you continue to work on the status quo, anytime your exporters are changing their exportation policy, then certainly you will see the prices are volatile and you are the first one to get hit. And for the audience today, I think you need to be aware that Thai and Vietnamese governments, they are persuading their farmers to go on high value rice varieties rather than continue to grow in the ordinary rice. That is very common in our market today. And in that itself, I think that the monopoly of bananas at the current state has to be reviewed, not just about the licensing issue, but also on the product range issue. Because if you go back to the fundamental definition of monopoly, it is about one firm having the entire share of a particular product or service. And I think the particular product that we refer to here is the ordinary white rice. So if you begin to ask burners as well as future importers to stretch the product range beyond ordinary white rice, then you are not going to have a direct head-to-head competition with our local production. So in that itself, we are going to introduce a monopolistic competition based on product range that they import as well as what our local farmers produce. In that itself, we begin to see the value chain is stretched and value adding is going to be further elaborated. And I think in that, you are going to see this is going to become a very strong food security value chain. So it goes beyond the market, it goes beyond the farmers' livelihood as well. So,
Thank you very much, Dr. John. I think we lost you just at the end there, but we caught everything you said, I think. And I just kind of just going off the back of what you were saying about, how do we actually, strengthening the value chain and addressing the issue of, how do we increase sort of yield and productivity at the farm level. I just want to refer everybody who hasn't seen to the comment in the chat from Ezrin from Debut, which is a rice mill company in Panellists. I won't read out the whole comment because we're already quite short on time, but he just shares his perspective on the question of switching from input subsidy to direct compensation. And then I just want to emphasize at the end the comment that we need to not just focus on regulating the balance of importing rice, but rather put more effort to increase the local yield. So I just want to, on the back of that comment, come back to you, Prof. Fatimah. I want to pick up on a question we received. We received a couple of questions from Hok On Ku, and I want to ask you the first question that he's put, which is around transitioning to a market-based system rather than heavy reliance on subsidy. The paddy farming sector should attract younger farmers with new developments in technology, including precision agriculture, drones, plant health assessments, input application. But at the moment, the farmers cannot afford this approach, and it can only happen through regional development agencies. So I wanted to use that question to ask you, I think, when we look at the longer term trajectory here, as Dr. John was also saying, there's a midterm and long-term vision. In the longer term, this R&D, these productivity gains, these domestic yield increases are absolutely essential. So can you maybe just elaborate a little bit on how you think the roadmap can enable our local farmers to achieve those kind of technology gains and productivity gains to improve yield as we transition the subsidy structure? Oh, Prof, you're still on mute.
Laurence, can I call my co-researcher to give his opinion as well? Mr. Kusari? Hello? Are you there?
I'm very happy, but I'm not sure how we can do that because unless he's a participant, I'm not sure I can. I think
he's a participant. Sure. Yeah. Let's see whether he's in there. Is he there in the list of participants?
I think he's in the list of attendees, but that means that he can't. I can't put him up on screen, I'm afraid.
Right. Hope I'll give a very complex question. It's about growth and expansion, right, in the future. And of course, the new entrants, because of the control mechanism, right, and the return to farms, as mentioned by YB and also our studies, many studies, it's the same figure, about between 600, 500 to 700 per hectare, except for farmers who have about 10 hectares, they do well. And farmers who have 10 hectares, good practices, and they are also service providers. These are enterprising farmers, and we met them, and they are doing well. But when we heard that they receive subsidies, put subsidies about amounting to 80K, so we are a bit worried, so it's a bit lopsided towards big farms. Okay. Okay. So I don't have the answers, Homan, but I think to increase the value of industry or paddy industry is through the value added. And because we are so behind, as John said, John mentioned that we are moving towards de-industrialization with regards to paddy and rice. It is opportunities for us to open up opportunities to produce more value paddy and rice based products. From you use the paddy stem to produce organic fertilizer, produce better mihon, or all sorts of food or half product, or even wine. I know rice wine is very expensive, yeah, Mr. Sim, especially in Japan. I know that because my son lives in Japan for 13 years, and he told me that the rice wine there is very, very expensive. And we can sell rice wine, even though it's haram to the Malays, but we can export to other countries. So we need to develop that to entice entrepreneurs, to entice SMEs, and to entice the young to get into it. Because there's no prospect. The only prospect they have is planting paddy or produce bihon. And bihon or mihon or noodles, Laurence, I'm sure you have eaten it. Noodles are produced by the millers. So what prospect is there? That's one. And to entice the young, of course, you have to provide, you have to allow them to participate in the gadget as well as apps or startups. Be it in R&D, get them involved, or be it in a cooperative, get them involved so that they could. These guys are very creative, and the concept is not that complex. For example, what is so complex about the concept of Grab or Uber or Panda Food? Nothing complex, It's about sharing resources and mobilizing the platform, and that's it. You get many consumers. And the concept is not that difficult. So we can tap more creativity from them. How, say, for example, I have proposed to IPB because of the deduction problem. Yeah, Mr. Sim, YB Sim is very familiar with this. I propose an app is developed for paddy deduction, both for farmers, for millers and burners, so that they can share data, so that we can trace who deducted more than they should. So by providing platforms, they know the how much the quality paddy, how much deduction is made for all the participants. I've proposed that, but I don't know if I'll be quiet about it. Maybe they're thinking about it. So these are little apps that they are game changer. The use of drones, right? And some farmers are doing it to drones to distribute their pesticide, distribute their fertilizer, and also drones to do the early warning system, because some of them have their, even for 3 hectares is quite big, they could take their motorcycle to go at the end to check which plants are, attacked by pests, and, paddy angin, or those plants that have, there's no, that doesn't provide rice, for example, is rotting. It can be visualized by looking at the color, and drones can help that, right? And then, of course, they want to know the water level, the pH level of the soil, and of course, the water level, and also the transportation. Of course, the best is blockchain, but maybe they are not ready, but something to that effect. I come across a study in Indonesia where a group of students who are IT experts, they went down to the field, they talked to the farmers and persuade them to be involved in blockchain, and they were quite successful in that sense. But it requires lots of persuasion, lots of effort to convince them to get involved. It involves many parties, the government, the ICT people, the student, the farmers, the young, and so on. So we need to provide that ecosystem that will entice the youngs, either, as I mentioned earlier, give them the attraction for businesses in paddy and rice base. Even fertilizer is enough. You are able to come up with organic fertilizer, not only paddy, but also for vegetable, also for oil palm, but also for rubber, cocoa, and even part-timers, gardeners in the rural area for urban farming and so on. The prospect is big because we import, I think, more than 2 billions of fertilizer. If only we can reduce by 10%, 20% is enough to help the producers. So I'm sorry, I don't have the right answer, but I have that vision to kind of, to enrich the sector, more dynamic, and as YB said, to create that dynamism, to give the freedom for the farmers to decide for themselves, to also to reduce the the monopolistic tendencies, because no monopolists want to innovate. Why should they innovate? Because they monopolize the sector, right? So, but when there is competition, then they will strive for efficiency, they will strive for betterment, so that they will of course step on each other to be better. But as Sean Peter said, I mean, competition is important for creativity. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. So we are nearing the end of the session. So just in advance, I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to get to all the questions. But just to reiterate, as I said earlier, we agree with Prof. Fatimah that what we would do is we will publish the questions that were asked on our Facebook page, and we'll work with Prof to provide answers to any questions that we didn't.
Thank you. That is good. Yeah, but there are good questions there. And
yeah, there's lots of good. Yeah, so I just want to squeeze one last question in before then I invite just sort of a quick round of closing remarks. So the question I want to squeeze in is just something we haven't touched on, but relates a little bit to some of the issues that we've mentioned. This was a question I received actually through a different channel from Amar from UTP. So he asked, and he's been studying on innovation and diffusion in paddy industry since 2012, and he asks, from his perspective, he's seeing the challenges, the smallholders, whether they operate at sufficient scale in order to be able to achieve some of the innovations that we're talking about. And he asked whether we need to consider some options in terms of essentially industrial restructuring, looking at kind of compensating smallholders in order to kind of consolidate some of the existing small holdings into larger farms that have more economies of scale and can look at using that as a route to innovation. So I just wanted to bring that in because that's not something that that's not one of the policy options that's in the roadmap currently. So I think possibly maybe Dr. John, if you want to comment on that, or Prof Fatimah, or yeah. So I just wanted to bring in that idea of consolidation and compensation of farmers to produce some more medium scale farms.
I think Dr. John has mentioned it, right? For farmers to invest in whatever gadgets or machines, the farm capital has to be there, right? For them to invest. Farm capital means enough surpluses. At the moment, they don't have enough surpluses to invest on anything because very little money, right? When they don't invest, there is no innovation, right? But there are farmers who are creative enough. Say, I'm sure you have heard of this three rice system of rice intensification. They come up with their own rice, very organic, and they develop their own mills. And some farmers, I was surprised. They visited Alibaba and saw some cheap mills, cheap drying machine, and they bought them. And they have their own unique rice, and they sell it by themselves and mill by themselves. And they bypass the subsidies, yet they get good price, 15 ringgit per kg, because the demand is there, right? So these are the things that we need to develop first. Higher return to farmers, only through higher return, then farm capital will be improved, and this is where they can adopt or invent or innovate or buy modern technology. Maybe Dr. John can add to that.
Dr. John, is there any quick comment you want to add on that issue before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think what is really important is how do you induce farm investment, because basically, if you look at the current scenario, it is worrisome. For example, if you look at who are the labels or who are the contractors actually service the farms, especially when it comes to aged farmers. So you see our foreigners actually they're working harder than many local people here, and you hardly see any youngsters show interest in rice farming. So if we don't show the incentive of investing in rice farming, I'm pretty sure the structural issues will remain the same. And I think Prof made it right. She has written the same issues over and over again, and perhaps in the next 20 more years, I will be talking about the same stuff as well.
Indeed. Well, as hopefully we can all be here in 20 years' time looking at a different industry. But let's see. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Thank you, John.
Okay, well, I think I am very sorry to any questions that we weren't able to get to, but as I said, we will respond to those after the event on our Facebook page. So just to wrap up, I'd like to invite each of our panelists to maybe just give sort of 30 seconds on sort of key takeaways, messages, I think, for the audience, and maybe also for the policymakers currently in MAFI and in the other kind of key stakeholders. So maybe we can start with Dr. John and then YB and then conclude with Prof. Fatimah. So over to you, Dr. John.
Yeah, thanks. I think the key takeaway here is that we need to incentivize farmers. We need to empower them. And it's not just for the purpose of their livelihood, but it is also for their value chain development. As we talk about agriculture transformation, you need actors there. And the real actors here are the farmers. And they need to be facilitated by government policies as well as political interests. So I think all in all, if we think in long run, certainly you want to do the right things. But if you think about the short run, thinking about the voting power in the next 5 years, and we are unlikely to see any changes. So I think the political will got to stand up above all to make the shift. And I hope that we'll begin to see some changes based on some empirical evidence made out by Prof. Fatimah today.
Thank you very much, Dr. John. YB, your closing thoughts.
Thank you very much. I think we have, the National Agro-Food Policy will be coming out very soon. So I hope that our discussion here can send a message to the policymakers and do some changes, because we are talking about the next 10 years. 10 years of lost opportunities is a huge disservice and injustice to the farmers and the rice industry. We need to quickly reform paddy and rice sector and also agriculture sector as a whole. Farmers must be incentivized because like what I just now, everyone, no farmers, no food. Okay, and if farmers are not being treated well, there will be no food for everyone. So I suggested just now, apart from direct subsidies and the roadmap, of course, Professor Fatimah's roadmap is very comprehensive, but there are many other things that can be done. Okay, there are many other things can be done in terms of competition in R&D, in terms of deregulations in the ministry, jumping out, getting all these PPK and the LPP stakeholders to understand the new role rather than trying to get them to transform into a real service provider, incentivize them so that they can compete in a real marketplace, providing the best service to the farmers. That is all key. And finally is that the ministry and departments must talk to each other. There's no proper roadmap or leadership. I'm sorry, I'm not saying that they have no ideas, but there are, ideas are in silos. They are not, putting everything in together. So that's why we have a lot of piecemeal reform here and there. But overall, there will be one step forward, one step back, or two steps forward, one step back. So that is not going to. That's not going to do well. Finally, I want to say is that don't be afraid of reforms. Yeah, there will always be people. Any reforms will bring goods and bad. Of course, there will be also other implications. But generally, it will lead if we are properly. We do proper study and we are not afraid to make changes. If that we have some setbacks in reform, we can always change. There's no issue, because agriculture is evergreen business. It's not going to go away. So if you do changes here and there, we experiment for the next 5-10 years, we will have a better industry. If we don't do and we procrastinate and we just kick the can down the road, it's not going to happen. It's not going to reform, and we will have a total a status quo that is not an option here in the rice sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much, YB. And finally, Prof Fatimah, your closing thoughts.
Yeah. Thank you. Words of wisdom from John and also YB. I'm so impressed the way you scope or the scoping of your vision of your wisdom in regards to the industry. Thank you so much. Right, as for me, I would like to remind everyone that don't be afraid of this transformation. It will not lead us to an uncharted area, right? We have proven cases, and these cases are not in America or not in EU, but Bangladesh, Bangladesh in the early 90s. And you know whatever Bangladesh is, their agriculture sector can be, very like India. Can be very complicated, very poor people and highly corrupted, and yet they transform and they could do it, and they do it in a very short term, 1 or 2 years. So we have to learn from them. And then of course Vietnam was once net water, also Indonesia. They were able to transform. Vietnam was able to transform from 3 tons to 6 to 7 tons between 16 years, right? Purely a structural reformation and liberalization and empowering the farmers. But they have this concept of, they don't go for estates. They have this concept of small farms, big field. So meaning they still maintain small farm, but in terms of organization and management, they make it efficient so that it is a big field, right? And of course China. Take note of this. Within 10 to 15 years, they'll be able to uplift close to 300 million poor people through policy that is farmer-oriented or farmer-centric, and of course technology. So it can be done. Not mentioning Israel or Holland. They're a tiny country. They have arid land, and yet they are fresh producer of food. All right. But my message is, don't worry of transformation. It's not going to be an uncharted territory. Right, it's been proven, and also I believe that the current 5 decades of vicious circle of stagnation, year after year, despite subsidies, the industry is still stagnation. We can reverse it by towards a virtuous circle through, as mentioned by all of you, some structural change, empowering the farmers, improve competition, create SMEs, create value-added activities for paddy and rice-based to entice new entrants, to make the industry dynamics, to increase the value of paddy and rice, and most important of all, to go back to the basic role of government, that is to improve productive capacity of everyone, particularly the farmers, meaning R&D to improve yield, products, rice wine, rice-based, and so on, so that the industry become, highly diversified and dynamic. With all this, we can create inclusive growth as well as sustainable paddy and rice industry in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Fatimah, and my sincere thanks to all 3 of our panelists today. I think it's been a really rich conversation, I think precisely because each of you has such a deep perspective and have different experiences, but that you've been very kind of open and informative in sharing those with us. I think I won't try to sum up everything, but I think the key message to me is, at the end there, each of you in your own way were saying that we actually have more to fear from the status quo than change. So we need to be bold and and have courage, but we also need to go about that change in the right way. And I think that what I see coming through as the message is that we need to think about how to transition from a control to empowerment. And I think that is a more helpful framing in some ways than deregulation and liberalization. It's not about just tearing things away and letting chips fall where they may. It's about how do we move to a more dynamic ecosystem, and how do we build the institutional structure, the government support structure, the industrial structure to achieve that. I don't think it's a simple thing, but where we are now with the extension of the monopoly for another 10 years is, I think, the crucial thing is that we mustn't waste that 10 years. I think we have to lay the groundwork for a different decision in 2030. And that, I think, crucially, as you know, as YB says, the game changer is, based on this report, is how we actually implement a structural shift in the subsidies and the institutional government support structures around that to ensure that we do move towards that more dynamic ecosystem that is ready for import deregulation potentially in the next decade. So thank you very much. Please, thank you also to all our attendees and for all your excellent questions. I'm sorry we weren't able to get to all of them. Please do go to our website to download the report and share it with anyone else that you think might be interested. We'll certainly be sharing it with the policymakers also, and hoping it can have some impact on the current thinking. So on that note, I will end the panel discussion. I'll just ask our panelists just to hang on if that's okay, and I'll hand over to Iskandar to end today's webinar. Thank you.